It usually begins with confidence. Not loud confidence, not aggressive confidence, but the kind that believes it is being helpful. A calm voice, often American, gently leaning forward and saying something like, "Actually, that's not how you spell it." And for a brief moment, Britain pauses, because the sentence hanging in the air is not a question, it's a correction, delivered to the country that invented the language. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. What makes this moment special isn't the mistake itself, it's the certainty. The absolute faith that British English is the one that's wrong. And this happens more often than anyone would like to admit. It happens in cafes, in classrooms, in offices, on trains, and increasingly, on the internet, where confidence travels faster than accuracy. Take spelling, a harmless place to start, or so it seems. An American notices the word color written on a sign. They squint slightly, smile politely, and say, "You've added an extra U there," added, as if Britain simply got carried away. The British response is usually silence, not because they don't know the answer, but because deciding how much effort this situation deserves takes time. Eventually, someone explains, gently, that color is the original spelling, that the U didn't sneak in. It was removed by Americans for efficiency. This is often where confusion sets in, because efficiency sounds logical, and logic feels correct, so the correction doesn't fully retreat. It just recalibrates. Well, in real English, and there it is, real English, said while standing in England, spelling becomes the battlefield of choice. Center. Check. Programming. Traveler. Each one met with the same confident reassurance that Britain has simply overcomplicated things. What's rarely mentioned is that many American spellings were standardized much later, shortened deliberately, marketed as modern. But explaining that tends to ruin the vibe. So instead, Britain nods, smiles politely, and quietly judges. Then comes pronunciation. This is where things escalate, because spelling disagreements are abstract. Pronunciation is personal. Someone hears the word aluminium spoken aloud. Their face tightens. "Wait, you're saying it wrong." "Wrong." The British speaker repeats it. Aluminium. The American shakes their head. "No, it's aluminium. One less syllable. One less problem. Except the word was named aluminium, with all the syllables included." This is usually where Britain gives up trying to help, because explaining that Americans removed a syllable feels strangely similar to explaining the missing U, and history suggests it won't land. Then there's Herb. An American hears the British pronunciation, raises an eyebrow. "You don't pronounce the H?" Britain waits. "No," comes the reply. "We do." Silence. Because pointing out that Americans are the ones who drop the H somehow feels rude, even though it's true. Pronunciation corrections often come wrapped in surprise, as if Britain has accidentally mispronounced its own words for centuries without noticing. Schedule becomes sked-jule. Advertisement loses syllables like excess baggage. Leicester triggers panic. An American looks at the word, confidently says, Leicester. Britain briefly considers changing the name of the city just to avoid the conversation. Then there's vocabulary, the real danger zone. Because vocabulary isn't just language, it's culture. Ask an American for chips in the UK, and watch confusion bloom. Correct a British person for calling them chips, not fries, and you've crossed a line. No, fries are thin, chips are thick. This explanation is delivered earnestly, as if Britain is unaware of potatoes. Then there's pants. An American hears the word used casually. Laughs. "You mean trousers." Britain nods. "Yes, that's exactly what we mean." The American insists. "No, pants are underwear." Now Britain is tired. Because this isn't a misunderstanding. It's a refusal to accept that words can mean different things in different places. Then comes the workplace corrections. Emails sent from the UK containing phrases like, "I'll ring you later." An American replies helpfully, "You mean call." "No, we meant ring." Spell check corrections follow. Red underlines appear beneath perfectly correct British spellings. And someone, somewhere, clicks correct all. Suddenly, an email about organizing a meeting at the center has been Americanized against its will. This is usually when Britain begins quietly resenting technology. Schools are where things get truly awkward. American students studying in the UK sometimes raise hands mid-lesson. "Actually, my teacher in the States said," the British lecturer pauses carefully, because this lesson is about English literature, written in England by English authors. The correction continues anyway. Grammar becomes the next battlefield. An American points out the use of got instead of gotten. "You're missing a word." Britain isn't missing it. Britain discarded it centuries ago. But again, explaining that feels unnecessary, so Britain lets it go. Internet arguments, however, do not let anything go. A British user spells defense. An American replies instantly. It's spelled defense. Hundreds of people watch this exchange unfold. Someone explains. Someone links history. Someone else says, language evolves. Which is ironic, because that's exactly why British English exists the way it does. The most painful moments come when Americans insist British English is incorrect English, not different, not regional, incorrect. This is where the humor turns tragic. Because correcting the origin of the language using a newer variation requires a level of confidence that borders on performance art. Britain doesn't argue loudly. It never has. It simply waits. Waits for the American to visit a British hospital and ask for the ER. Waits for confusion at the loo. Waits for the moment someone asks where the sidewalk is. And when that moment comes, Britain helps, politely, without correcting, which somehow makes it worse, because the British response is never, you're wrong. It's, oh, we just say it differently. And that quiet understatement says everything. By the end of most of these encounters, Americans don't leave embarrassed, they leave puzzled, because nothing feels hostile. Nothing feels aggressive, just gently humiliating. And perhaps that's the real lesson. British English doesn't need defending. It simply exists, unbothered, spelled fully, pronounced carefully, quietly confident. And somewhere, at this very moment, an American is typing a correction under a British comment. Certain, helpful, wrong. What makes this even better is that we haven't even touched the stories involving place names, legal language, medical terms, or the things Americans try to correct after living in Britain for years. Moments where confidence somehow increases while accuracy declines. Moments where the correction isn't just wrong, it's impressive. But those stories can wait. Because if there's one thing Britain is very good at, it's patience and letting someone finish being wrong. And just when you think the corrections can't possibly get worse, they do. Because the longer Americans stay in Britain, the more confident they become. There is a brief window, usually the first few weeks, where humility exists. Questions are asked, notes are taken, mistakes are laughed off. Then something dangerous happens. Familiarity. Suddenly, an American who has lived in the UK for 6 months begins sentences with, well, actually, over here you say, which is impressive. Considering the person they are correcting has lived over here their entire life, this is where place names enter the conversation. And place names do not forgive. Greenwich, Lugabaruga, Edinburgh. Each pronunciation delivered confidently, each one wrong in a way that suggests no research was attempted. Britain does not interrupt. Britain lets the pronunciation finish, then gently says, right, it's Greenwich. This is often met with disbelief. No, that can't be right. And for a moment, history itself is questioned. Then there are legal and medical terms, words Americans recognize, but slightly altered. Surgery doesn't mean an operation. Consultant doesn't mean entry level. Public school means the opposite of what they think it means. Americans try to correct these too. They shouldn't. The most ambitious corrections happen during arguments online, where Americans explain British English to British people using screenshots, dictionaries, and occasionally, confidence alone. These are the moments Britain screenshots quietly, because correcting pronunciation is one thing. Correcting the cultural context of a word you just learned yesterday is something else entirely. And perhaps the greatest irony of all is that Americans often leave Britain believing they've mastered British English, not because they were corrected, but because no one bothered to correct them, which in Britain is never a compliment. So if you've ever wondered why British people smile during these exchanges, why they nod politely, why they never argue back, it's because they already know something. Eventually, the correction will correct itself, and when it does, Britain will be there, quiet, patient, and absolutely certain it never needed fixing in the first place.